This is a follow-up discussion to my previous video on the vertical arm frame design, and I figured out why I'm having so many performance issues with this design, and I'm really excited to present it actually. But before I do, I want to first say that everything I present here is only based off my previous experiences, my tests, and just extrapolating based on all that. There's no science going on here. I'm just sharing what I have found, and I love sharing this with my audience because I learned so much from my audience. I have so many discussions with all of you. I read all my comments all the time, always, as much as I can until it gets crazy and I just can't read everything all the time anymore. But I try my best to read everything because I learned so much, and I've learned so much from the previous video as well, from all the comments in there. So thank you so much for interacting and just being there and talking. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That being said, let's move forward and let me tell you why I think that this frame has issues with all the pitch, roll, and yaw performance, and as well as speed. So what did I do? What did I do to test and figure out what was going on? So a while ago, Mr. Steele, well, over a year ago, Mr. Steele said in a podcast that when Get FPV made a skirt for an alien-style frame, he put the skirt on the frame, and he realized that yaw was completely out the window, and he had no more yaw authority. And I've been thinking about that for a long time now. And this is an idea that it's not a new idea. There's nothing new here. And I just felt dumb because I didn't realize it sooner. And people didn't tell me this because I probably just wasn't asking the right questions. But what I did was I just took tape and I taped up the whole frame all over, and then I flew it to see what it would feel like. And holy moly, I immediately had no yaw. My pitch and roll were completely terrible, and it was much, much, much slower. I mean, this frame with these awesome motors was slow. It was the same speed as this frame. What on earth is going on? So then I took this frame and I put the battery underneath because I figured it might be the battery that's in the middle that's causing problems. And then immediately I had complete yaw back, and I had pitch and roll back, although I don't like the underslung battery because it was flopping around, but I had all my control back. 5 seconds later, I realized, oh my gosh, it's because the props aren't properly unloading. So this is my theory. I just came up with it this was my aha moment, that what's probably happening is that I have this large mass in the middle of the frame, and the prop thrust is just bumping right into that mass. And I had a discussion with Ryan Harrell a couple of days ago, and he was telling me about how some very reputable people they say that the thrust coming off the prop disc is very much in the lateral direction, and air actually does travel through the disc, and it does reach the arm, and it does see air flowing over the arm. And so, I mean, it's common knowledge. It would make sense that the thrust coming off the prop disc is in a conical shape. It's not like in a column. It doesn't come off straight down in a column. And that's I mean, you could just test that by idling your quad and feeling next to the blade. You can feel thrust coming off sideways. Based on that idea and my new theory of just the discs need to unload, it makes complete sense why a stretched X frame has more control, just generally feels different in the air. It's because the props are farther apart and the thrust coming off the disc is not interfering with each other. And particularly the front props interfering with the rear props because you're in fast forward flight. And now let's think about, why do people say that they prefer 5-inch props on a 6-inch frame? Now I can say that it's because the props have more room to unload, so they can more effectively execute maneuvers. They're faster at responding, take less amps to respond, and you get your sharp roll and pitch back. And the frame is larger, so you have a little bit less yaw because larger frames have a little bit, tiny bit less yaw. But the props are more efficiently able to execute their maneuvers to get that improved yaw control. So that's freaking amazing. And so now my concept of frame design and however I look at frames, it's just totally different. It's completely different. I look at things differently. So I have a new prototype of this coming based on this idea. I already have a new design, completely redesign of this frame, and I hope it solves the problems. But I'm also having a bunch of other problems with this frame as well. Because the frame is so darn rigid, I'm getting tons of vibrations into the flight controller, into the gyro, and I can't turn off my filters, and not being able to turn off your filters nowadays is a huge negative, and that's just not good. And there's a number of reasons why it could be. I personally think it's just because the frame is just too rigid. But people will say, people have said in the comment section, it's the vibrations of the arms in the yaw direction, which I'm not sure, because it feels so rigid in the yaw direction. It's hard to believe that the motor has enough torque to rattle the arm in that yaw direction. But if you do run with that, I would also say that it may be that the motor is actually twisting on the frame, twisting on the arm, and causing these twist vibrations going back into the frame as well, because it's hoisted up on a cantilever on the arm, so it has this lever to do that twisting motion. So those are the problems, in addition to the props unable to unload properly on the frame. Those are the problems I'm having with this frame. And while it's a really, really pretty frame, and I really do love looking at it, it doesn't perform the way I want. So it flies great and it performs great, and actually having the battery low like that, having the CG super tight, I found out after adjusting all my rates and messing with a whole bunch of stuff, it did feel way, way better, and I could just pump up the rates and I could control it way, way better. So it's a huge performance increase to have the CG so tight and the battery so low. But unfortunately, you have this issue where the props are just not unloading. I'm also not willing to make a drastically larger frame because I don't like big frames. I like proximity flying, so I want to be able to squeeze through small holes. This is already a 237 millimeter frame. It's already too big. That's big enough to fit 6-inch props. So if my next prototype doesn't solve at least half of those problems, I have tried to account for the vibration issues, I've tried to account for the disk unloading issues, and hopefully it will have the performance that I want, I'm probably going to abandon this frame. It's a great flying design and it's a great flying frame, but now knowing what I know, I wouldn't fly it because I want that speed, I want that agility, and I want that yaw control back. I don't want to just pump up my rates and have my motor spinning faster to compensate. The concept of the props being able to unload, I think, is very real. It's not a full explanation, but it's a partial explanation. And now I think that possibly pod style frames that have that sleek pod in the middle might actually have better performance, even if they weigh a couple more grams, because the props are able to unload over this smooth surface where the prop thrust can just blow over it easily, not this like wiffle ball surface where it has to like go find a hole through. Also explains why caged frames don't fly well at all. Also explains why the Mosquito from Furious that they made a while ago that they stopped making flied horribly because it had these not prop guards, but it had these ducts around it which were just blocking all the thrust. If you look at the Baby Hawk frame, the actual design of the Baby Hawk, it only has, I should have brought one, but it only has rails. It doesn't have anything below the prop line. So that's actually a really good prop guard design because it's not blocking any of the prop's ability to unload. So you're getting more performance out of the motors and props. And if you look at Tiny Whoops and these kinds of frames, they just have lower yaw authority. If you crack the prop guards off a Tiny Whoop, you have just better performance all around. And it's not just because of the weight reduction. It's because the props are able to unload. I'm assuming at this point, I think it's because the props are able to better unload. So in order to get really excellent performance out of our multi-rotors or out of our mini quads, we need to consider what is going on with the props' ability to unload. Super interesting. Super duper interesting to me. I mean, real aha moments.